So as usual, we have a selection of Africa's finest GDEs, the Google Developer Experts. And these are people recognized as experts on various Google technologies, such as Android, cloud, and web. So the Hangout on Air that we host every month, it's a live show with a new topic every month. And as it's live, we encourage everyone to ask questions on the live chat on YouTube or the Google Plus event. We'll get to those questions towards the end of this show. The video will also be available for your viewing pleasure shortly after the show. So if you want to get involved, you can tweet using the hashtag #GoogleAfricaDevs. And this month we have a slightly different topic. We will be recapping the GDD Europe event that most of us got to attend. So what is the GDD Europe event? It's Google Developer Days that was hosted in Poland in Europe this year. It's a 2-day conference focused on Google developer technologies with hundreds of Googlers and thousands of developers that attended. There were dozens of talks, live demos, code labs, training sessions, and sandbox sessions where we got to chat directly with Googlers. So that's what we're discussing this month. We have an exciting panel online. I am Alex Collar, an Android GDE from Cape Town, South Africa, and I will let the others introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Franks and I'm an Android GDE based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Hey, I'm Dario Mungoy. I'm an Android GDE based in Canada, but I'm from Mozambique.
Hello, Kenneth here. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya, Cloud GDE.
Hello, Johan Latoya from Cape Town, South Africa, Cloud GDE.
Hey everyone, my name is Ire. I'm from Lagos, Nigeria, and I'm a Web Technologies GDE.
Hello everyone, my name is James Moy. I am a Cloud GDE based in Nairobi, Kenya.
Fantastic, thanks. We have a wonderful panel of GDEs. We also have Joseph from iHub on the line. iHub's kindly recording and sharing this video. And this month we have a special guest, Nick Rout from GDG Capetown. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me. I'm Nick Rout, as Alex said, GDG Capetown organizer and Android developer at Luno.
Yes, so GDG organizer, could you tell us a little bit more about what the GDG is and what role you play in it?
Cool. Well, GDG, another acronym, stands for Google Developer Group. And the general idea is that you have a local community of people who develop things for Google technologies in your city. So I am the organizer for GDG Cape Town, but there are GDGs all around the world. And the idea is that we meet up hopefully on a monthly basis to hold events and talks surrounding Google technologies to learn and to provide a space for people to discuss these interesting topics.
Cool. And I believe Meetup is the tool of choice for organizing the events. So if people want to find their local GDGs, is that a good way to get in contact?
It definitely is. Most GDGs also try to stay active on social media like Twitter to announce events, but Meetup is definitely the place to go if you want to know about our latest workshops and talks and that sort of thing.
Fantastic, and I believe DevFest season is kicking off fairly soon. Do you know of any GDG events around DevFest this year?
Well, we have one event coming up in Cape Town, which is quite exciting on the 21st of October, and that is a shared event between GDG Cape Town and GDG Johannesburg, where we'll be doing an Android Things workshop, so a hands-on Saturday morning session where we'll be building a fun project with attendees.
Awesome. So DevFest is when all of the GDGs and various developer meetup groups create large events focused on bringing developers together. Cool, thanks, Nick. Of course, one of the main reasons we brought you on, and back to the main topic of this month's Hangout, you were lucky enough to join us all at GDG Europe. So I believe it was one of the larger conferences you've been to. So could you share your experience and what that was like with us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I did attend GDG Europe. It was my first overseas conference, so that was really exciting. And in a word, it was fantastic. It was a big spectacle at the ICE Congress Center in Poland, and it was 2 days packed full of talks on all Google technologies. I attended basically all the Android ones, because that's where my interest lies, but there's a lot of other events and hands-on code lab sessions happening for web and cloud, and just the opportunity to meet Googlers and fellow developers from all around the world was really, really cool.
Yeah, I can second that. Had quite an exciting time and I learned a lot. So let's dive into some of the technologies and experiences that were available at GDD this year. So Rebecca and Dario, maybe you could kick us off with a bit more about what went down on the Android side.
Okay, so for my point of view, I had a lot of fun because I was a speaker at GDD Europe. So I was able to speak on stage about Android things, which is one of my exciting topics I like speaking about. So I just gave an introduction about Android things and some examples of how you can use it within your apps or build certain apps for Android things. So that for me was my highlight of the event, was speaking. It was lots of fun, very nerve-wracking though. Big stage, lots of people, but it was really, really exciting and such a good experience to be a part of such an awesome event. So that was, for me, my top highlight. Yeah, I think also the other talk that stood out for me was architecture components talk by Florina. And she spoke about the new paging library that was released, which was quite exciting as well. So I think those are some of my top highlights from the event.
Awesome, yeah. Thanks. I tend to agree that Rebecca talking on the main stage representing Africa was a fantastic achievement and one of my highlights. Dario, I know you're raring to go and you want to share your good times of the GDD, so go ahead.
Yeah, without any doubts, like seeing SSA represented at the conference was really the best. And also the topic was relevant, still into Android things. I think the best thing was to see all the experiments that were done, including the robot that takes a picture and then draws the picture on the paper. It was all made by Android things. And the most exciting thing is that most of those projects were made by people from the community, which like is very inspiring. The second highlight for me was being able to be a TA, so TA for teaching assistant, during one of the code labs alongside Florina and other GDs, and it was very interesting to see that developers were not there just to listen for what people were saying, but actually making putting all those things in practice into by doing code labs. And it was interesting because while they were doing the code labs, they actually started thinking about how they could implement all these technologies into their apps, and they had some really interesting discussions about that. I think that's one of the most valuable things that happen in the community, be able to think about solutions for different problems and using these technologies that were talked about during the conference.
Yeah, I agree. The hands-on sessions where you actually get to code, those are my favorite by far. Nick, as an Android developer, were there any highlights relevant to Android devs that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, Dario touched on it, but definitely being involved in code labs for topics like constraint layouts and Kotlin was really cool because, yeah, I mean, it provides a sort of a hands-on, practical supplement to the talks that you get there. So you kind of go straight from a talk on a new Android topic and you head straight into a code lab. So you have knowledge and the primer, and then you put it into practice straight away. That was really cool. And obviously the opportunity to, while doing the code lab, because I mean you can do it at home, to speak to a Googler and fellow people to figure things out was cool. And there were some very interesting talks. One for me that I really enjoyed was there were talks on Android Oreo's background execution limits. It's been quite a topic for discussion lately. It seems like a big change, but it sort of it seemed to clear quite a bit of it up for me of what you should do and what you shouldn't do going forward with Oreo. And then the talk on the support library, version 26, was also interesting, especially liked Issa Rae's talk on physics-based animations. She put together some really cool demos and even put them up on GitHub, so I found that really cool.
Awesome, fantastic. I'm more than happy to carry on talking about Android for the rest of the show, but I think Kenneth might get a little cross with me. So Kenneth, from the cloud side, let's hear what was going down at GDD this year. Kenneth?
Hey everyone. I mean, it was a big conference and we had a lot of different topics, and I mean, we just had a lot from the Android side. On the cloud side, mostly a lot happened on day 2. Started with the keynotes first of all, and a big thing that I learned from the keynote was that actually majority of services in the Google Cloud Stack are actually built in Poland by amazing engineers there. So that was a big highlight, especially us attending the conference in Poland. Now, what caught my attention was one of the sessions that was on day 2 as well. And this was a session on Kubernetes and Flixbus. So Flixbus is one of the biggest bus companies in Europe, and anyone who has done a Euro tour on budget knows about Flixbus. And so they shared about how Kubernetes came and helped them scale the infrastructure. And it was very, very interesting, from the beginning till the end, and what Kubernetes has helped them achieve, especially at that amount of scale. So think of their infrastructure and handling all those buses across Europe, and being able to monitor them real time and being able to schedule. So seeing that and hearing more stories and real application on, and this was a very detailed talk where they talked more about that in practice. So I found it very interesting for me as a cloud expert, hearing a story about a company and how they had implemented, and this was not just like the normal demo or talk about Kubernetes and pods and clusters, but this was actually some of the challenges that they faced, and that pretty much another maybe on day 1, something else that I actually spent time was visit the Google Assistant booth. Google heavy on AI and AI first kind of approach, and I had some time to spend with one of the developer advocates at Google on the Google Assistant team, and just ask them a lot about what's coming and some of the challenges that people have faced building conversational UI on Google. And then lastly, I attended a session as well on the Google Assistant by the 2 developer advocates, and they shared a lot about where they are and what's coming, how you can leverage on Google Cloud Platform to help build better conversational UI. So think about using cloud functions and serverless computing, and a lot of other SDKs that they have released on their library. Yeah, I'll hand it over to back to you, Alex.
Awesome, thank you, Kenneth. It sounds like there's a lot happening on the cloud side too. But to hear more on cloud, let's check in with Johan.
Hey, so it was really interesting going to these conferences as a cloud guy, like the server nerds, because it's usually more focused on Android and web stuff, right? And we've got GCP Next, and if you don't know it, it's a yearly event from Google that's only focused on Google Cloud. They do all the big announcements there. So a lot of this event and all of the topics that presented that were more cloud side, it was more bolstering what they already had. So letting you know that they have this range of large and exciting features and services that you can use, and how you can use that to supercharge your own app. An example of this was one of the talks was how to combine Firebase functions and machine learning to do something interesting with your app. And walking away from this conference, they had 3 major themes for me, which I walked away with. The one was TensorFlow, so like AI stuff. And they had Kubernetes, and the big one was also they pushed a lot of Google certification for me, which is interesting because there's this new certifications that you can get now. If you don't know, it's the Google Cloud Architect and Google Cloud Data Engineer. And they were pushing a lot of, they had a big booth of this, and they had a lot of details in this. Like you could talk to people that are certified and actual Googlers. And walking away from this, I really liked, if you want to have a talk, you want to go look at, there was the Google Assistant stuff, which is always cool. But they ended off day 2 with an intro to DeepMind, which was really interesting to me, where they talked about how they're using machine learning and AI inside of Google and what they're doing with it and the programs they're running and how they're trying to help the community by using AI, which was always good. But that's all the big stuff for me.
Interesting, thank you. So it won't be long until my Google Home is taking over the world. All right, then there's also, of course, the web technologies, which is an exciting part of Google. Ari, could you share some of your experiences and takeaways from GDD?
Yeah, I can. So for the web, as you would imagine, the focus was mainly with progressive web apps, as it usually is for Google the past few years. But this year, we're really seeing the whole concept of progressive web apps mature a lot more and really come into their own. So the message from Google wasn't so much about you should start building your first progressive web app. It was assuming you already were doing that, and it was about building a lot more on all the other things that we had learned like from previous conferences. So we saw a lot of talks about things like best practices for building progressive web apps, and they spoke about things like how you can combine a progressive web app with whatever framework you might be using. So I remember in one of the earlier conferences, it was much more limited, and it kind of assumed that you were just building a static website. So I think Google is starting to realize that they need to be able to play with all the frameworks that people are using. So you're seeing a lot of talks and content around building progressive web apps that are still working with things like Angular or other frameworks like React and all that other stuff. So that was really refreshing, because for them to see them like acknowledge all these other frameworks and acknowledge how people are building their applications now. And they also spoke about the whole idea of building progressive web apps with AMP. And that's kind of a really interesting technique where it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. So with AMP, it's really fast and a really fast first visit, but it's just completely static. Whereas with a progressive web app, it's more dynamic and it's much faster on things like subsequent visits. So they just showed a really cool technique about how you could combine both of those and build even more performant applications. And they also spoke a lot about new tools that they're developing for progressive web apps. They introduced this new tool, which they call Workbox. And that's kind of the successor to a couple of other tools they had released before, but kind of just individual things doing specific tasks. Whereas Workbox is something that is way more for a bunch of different things. So you can handle stuff like offline caching, offline analytics, a bunch of stuff. So it's something that you'd probably want to include in any progressive web app that you're working on. That was really cool. I think the part that I had, or I gained the most, or I found the most productive was the code labs, like the other people have mentioned as well. I did a couple of those and I found it really helpful because even though these things are already available online, like anyone can do them, you don't have to be at the actual conference to do them. I found it really helpful to have someone just take me through it and be doing it with other people. It kind of just forces you to actually get it done because you might not do that otherwise. So that was really cool. One in particular I did was one about Firebase functions and how to implement push notifications. That was really awesome. And I guess the highlight for me actually was I had like a camera crew following me around. So I got to act like a celebrity for most of the conference. That was awesome.
Yes, that was awesome.
Celebrities. Rebecca and Ira.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can catch the highlight video of the GDD conference starring Irie as the introductory actress. So we'll share the link to that video after the show, but a fantastic little spotlight there. And thanks for the update on web. It's good to hear that progressive web apps are actually being pushed further to integrate well with the existing technologies and frameworks that people are using. So if you're not building an Android instant app, there is always a progressive web app for you.
Actually, just wanted to go back a little bit to Android. One thing that we forgot that I think was very important and developers should know is to go and look at the talk about performance tools by WatchTech. So I feel that that talk is a must-watch to all developers, and it will give insights on which tools are available in Android Studio now to help debug and profile our apps. And I think it's very important, especially in the context where in Sub-Saharan Africa we're normally dealing with devices with not too much resources available to us. I think this is a very pertinent talk to watch as well.
Yeah, Dario, that's a good point. And that was another example of a talk that was very hands-on. We could see the exact screenshots of tools that we could use and how to solve specific problems. It was very useful. James, do you have any further comments on what was happening on the website?
So I think Ken and Johan have already highlighted what was happening on the cloud side as a cloud GD. But my highlight was actually the containers talk, how to build a simple microservice, containerize it in Docker, and then scale your cluster using Kubernetes. And the talk by some guy from Flixbugs was very, very insightful on that level. There was also some very interesting talks in natural language and cloud vision APIs. Also, Firebase functions was also a very interesting talk as well. And even though I'm a cloud GD, I'm also very interested in the other areas. And one of particular was the progressive web apps. And for me, this was because we are building our website to become a progressive web apps. And we have very, very insightful talks in that area as well, just as Ida has highlighted. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks, James. So let's take a few questions from the audience now. Johan, here's one for you, perhaps. What are the advantages of being a certified cloud expert?
So I can only speak for local context, but at the moment we've got a lot of Google's really pushing out, and we've got agencies coming up doing a lot of Google work now. And the big advantage for me for being certified is just you have that recognition from Google. It's like I've done the cloud architect one, and they really go into detail where it's like you go through most of the entire platform, and to get it you need to have quite a low-level understanding of most of the platform. So as soon as you see that certification, you know this person knows what they're talking about when they say don't do that, this is cheaper, rather do that. Yeah, but it's more just recognition. It's get your foot in the door and you can show you actually know what you're talking about.
Okay, cool. Is there required training for those certifications?
So Google themselves, they don't have any training, but they do link to a Coursera course that they have that you can go for free, and it takes you through everything, which is awesome. But it's a lot from taking it. What I remember, it's a lot of experience. So you need to know which products to use and stuff like that, but also know the products themselves. So that Coursera course is excellent.
Okay, cool, excellent. Another question from the audience. There were a lot of new code labs at GDD, but how do we find the new code labs on the Google Developers Code Lab page? Because they seem to be interspersed with all the existing ones. Nick, I know you were doing a lot of code labs on the day. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I did most of the Android code labs, and what I found was that the names of the code labs often matched the names of the items on the GDD schedule that were marked as training items. So there is an official GDD schedule that's readily available. You can Google that. And for example, I'll go and have a look there now. We can have a look that there's a training session called Build a Mobile App with Firebase. If I'm not mistaken, some of the code labs are named the same, at least the Android ones that I did were. So that might be a good way to track them down. Otherwise, I mean, if you'd like to DM me on social media, I'm pretty sure I could put together a list of at least the Android ones. So.
Fantastic. So you heard it here. Nick's going to put together a curated list of all of the new code labs from the GDD event. Cool. One other question that's come in is, how would you say the balance between Android, web, cloud, and AI focus was across both the attendees and the schedule of the event? Who would like to have a stab at this one? No one.
I'll give a little bit of an answer.
Okay, cool. Rebecca, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the planning in terms of the event, I was a little bit involved in the sort of background operations of that. So a lot of the focus, they try get attendees that sort of match the talks. So they know that there'll be sort of a couple of TensorFlow talks. I don't know if there was, actually, I don't remember, but like they'll know there's a certain amount of Android talks and this and that. And then they sort of target those groups in order to solve next to. So there's a lot of planning involved with making sure that the right people are attending. In terms of like, from what I saw, most of the sessions were really well attended. There were only, I think if I recall, there were 2 different rooms, and then there were a lot of training rooms. So the training rooms were quite full. I think retrospectively, they could have been a bit bigger. So a lot of people were saying that there wasn't enough space to attend the trainings. So maybe that needs to be a bit bigger for next year. But yeah, I think that's the best I can answer that question.
Cool. If I could just offer a follow-up on that. So if I look at the question, it's what I look at the schedule, they very much divided it up equally into like AI stuff, web stuff, and Android stuff for me. And the important thing for me is also what all of the talks kind of reinforced was it's not totally 3 different subjects. It's you use cloud to enable some web stuff. You use AI to make your web app or Android app better and do more things there. Because you have TensorFlow on Android and stuff now too, which is also mentioned, which was interesting.
Yeah. So I thought it was a very well-balanced conference. If we look back at I/O a couple of years ago when Firebase was announced, I think just about every single session was about Firebase. So it wasn't quite like that. I thought, as Johan says, there were sort of cross-pollination between topics in all of the talks. But you could still focus on some specific Android things like the animations, which was fantastic. Cool. So the sandbox sessions were fantastic because we got to interact directly with the Googlers who create the technologies that we use. And we could have some interesting conversations and interactions. So if I could ask everyone on the panel, what was your most interesting interaction with a Googler at their event? Rebecca, let's start with you.
Okay, so I think for me, I had a few interesting conversations, but one of the ones that was really interesting for me was a conversation with Dave Smith, who is a developer relations lead or a developer relations person at Google for Android things. And it was just in a conversation around how Android things is only specifically designed for the platforms that they're supporting, whereas typically like within AOSP, you get the acronym confused, there you can download the whole source code and build it yourself and put it on a different device, where Android things, because it hasn't been released publicly yet, it's only available for the platforms that are officially supported by Android things. So there's a lot of people asking and requesting for this kind of support to be able to build it for the devices that they want to build it for. And it eventually might happen that when Android things goes into public beta or public, not beta anymore, it might be available for people to download the source code, but there will be certain parts of it that won't be available for you to sort of build yourself, as the same within Android. So for instance, on Android, the Google Play services libraries are not open source, so you can't build your own sort of Google Play services. So a similar thing happens with Android things, in that some of the parts of it won't be available publicly because a lot of it is security related as well. So that was quite an interesting conversation for me.
Okay, great. Yeah, I do hope they open source as much of it as they can. And from now on, I'm just going to call you Rebecca Things. I think it'll be easier. Nick, I did see you interacting with Dan Galpin and his hat at some point. I don't know if you have a story to share around that.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. So for those that don't know, Dan Galpin is a Googler who tends to run and organize a lot of the Udacity Android courses, which I myself have done. So spotting him in real life is like a bit of almost like a fanboy moment. And went up to chat to him, and turned out to be a really cool guy. And the one question I did ask was, I mean, in every video I've ever seen him, he's wearing a hat. Does he ever not wear a hat? So just for me, he removed his hat, and that was a special moment. GDD.
It's the special moments that count, yeah. Does anyone else have an interesting interaction with Googlers or similar people to share?
So just interesting from the conversation I've had, I've spoke to a lot of people from the Kubernetes team, and it was just really interesting to see how mature the platform is now. When you have people like GitHub that are now using Kubernetes, wow, this is huge, and this is actually in production. It's just really interesting.
Okay, cool. Ari, did you interact with any Googlers?
Yeah, I did. I actually got to speak with Yasmin Evian, who is designer relations at Google. And it was my first interaction with anyone who does designer relations. So that was kind of really interesting for me to find out more about the role and also about material design. So I'm very much interested in design. I do some design myself as well. So that was an interesting conversation to just find out more about where material design is going and just the whole process of it.
Awesome, that's cool. Yeah, I think Nick might have also had an interaction with Jasmine.
Yeah, I did. So what they did at GDG, which was really cool, is that they opened up some of the design advocates, design relations people, such as Yasmin, to go in and like have a 15-minute design review of your app with them. So I managed to sneak in a design review for our app, Luno, while we were there. And yeah, it was a good 15 minutes spent critiquing sort of finer elements of material design, navigation, affordance, accessibility, stuff like that, that I personally find very interesting. And I think it will be very beneficial to put some of that feedback back into our.
Okay, fantastic. That ties in quite well with a question we have at the moment. Where is material design going? It's quite an open question. Dario, I know you're quite fascinated with material design, so if you want to jump in there.
So like, obviously I'm fascinated with material design, but not the designer myself. But I remember having this, watching this talk by Matthias Duarte way back, where he talked about different layers of material design. And honestly, I don't think I would be in a position to actually talk more about where material design is going, because in the last few years or couple of months, haven't really touched into like going and getting myself updated with the design guidelines. But the other thing I wanted to follow up through with the interaction with Google was with Dan Galpin. Was really great. So a couple of years back, when I was still running the GDG in Maputo, and I've noticed that all the GDGs across Sub-Saharan Africa were like having this offline package that had Udacity video courses on them, where Dan Galpin was involved, and it was really interesting to have a talk with him and kind of know and try to understand how they're building these videos. And the most exciting thing to know is that there might be like updated content coming up with all the new stuff that was presented at GDG as well.
Cool, yeah. Just touching on the material design stuff, the layered cake of material design, as it's often referred to. One of the things, open sourcing of the various components across the platform, so Android, iOS, and web. These components are all being open sourced and are available on GitHub. But this sounds like it could be something we dive into in a bit more depth in another episode, perhaps. So then back to interactions with Googlers. James, do you have something to share?
Yes, I had a very interesting discussion with a Googler from London who was very interested to know about the startup ecosystem here in Africa, especially in the fintech area. And we had a very nice discussion on how startups in Kenya are using the cloud, especially those that are in the fintech area, and any challenges that developers are facing when it comes to using Google Cloud, because we've had quite some complaints when people are trying to use Google Cloud here in Kenya. Sometimes their cards are not working, but the good thing is now there's the free tier for Google Cloud Platform. So it was interesting to meet with him and share some of the pain points that we have as developers and also as people who are trying to build startups.
Excellent, cool. Kenneth, everywhere I looked at the event, I saw you popping up, so I know that you had some good interactions with Googlers there. Please share with us.
Yes, indeed. I did have like some interesting interactions, a lot of Googlers, but the one that stuck was one that was just so random. So there's this game like a spaceship that, you know, you form a team and you collaborate to ride this spaceship. And so after we did like a few, like 4 or 5 runs with the game, after the game, I interacted like one of the teammates, and she ended up being actually a Googler and working for the Google Cloud Data Store. And so we use Google Cloud a lot, the company where I work at, and data store is also one of the things that we use, and some of the limitations that we had faced. And it was interesting to just go deep and just share like the pain points. But now the interesting one was her understanding what we're doing, and especially understanding what mobile money is M-Pesa, and so I had to like tell her M-Pesa and what mobile money does and how it's amazing. And she was like, what is this, that is not even connected to a bank. So, it's a very interesting conversation, her understanding more about Africa, Kenya, fintech space, and mobile money. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds like you had a good time. So one of the things that it might not be entirely relevant to the technologies and the learnings, but the venue for this GDD Europe conference was fantastic. And that was the city of Krakow in Poland. It's quite a magical place, actually. I absolutely loved it. There's an old castle. There's literally a dragon that breathes fire.
Only saw it for 5 seconds, though.
Yeah, we turned around at just the right moment. And there are lots of interesting foods and drinks available as well. So, Rebecca, what was your favorite thing about Krakow?
Yeah, it was a really, really nice city. I enjoyed walking around in the streets and especially in the city center. So they call it the Old Town. And there's a lot going on at night. And what we did was myself and Dario and Roberto, they have these horse-drawn carts that you can take. So we caught one of those for a bit and you get like a little tour around the city, which was really, really nice. So for me, that was one of my highlights of attending the event.
Cool, yeah. Nick, I know you keep going on about this all the time, so you have something to share here.
Yep. So one of the big tourist sort of attractions that was all about Krakow is their salt mine. So we attended that one day, and what that is, as the name would suggest, a mine where they used to extract rock salt. It's no longer active, but you can go on a tour through lots of underground tunnels. I think we're almost 150 meters underground. They've carved out cathedrals in there as well. It's quite a magical experience. And interesting to know that back in the day, it was feasible to have a mine as big as this because salt was so valuable that it was the only way that you could preserve food. I just also remembered that one of the cool things was that basically the entire place was made of rock salt. So you could sort of touch the wall and then lick your finger or directly lick the wall if you're into that kind of thing, and it would be salty. And also apparently not unhygienic because the salt kills all the bacteria down. So cool.
Is that what they told you, Nick?
Well, I mean, that's what the lady said. So, I mean, I don't really want to think about what could have been on the wall, but you know.
Yeah, the salt mine was a fun time. James, did you have any exciting adventures in Krakow?
Yes, it's obviously a very beautiful city, and besides meeting with all the Google developer experts from all over the world, meeting some interesting local developers as well. We had some really good time. Went around the city, we went to the town square, very beautiful. Generally had a very, very good time in Krakow.
Yeah, it is a very beautiful city.
It
Dario,
is indeed.
Yeah, Dario, while we were trapped down in the salt mines for an extra half an hour after the tour, I heard enough from you, but let's share it with the audience too. What were your highlights?
Basically, one was getting to eat pierogies. So we tried to go to the top 10 best pierogi places in Krakow. Of course, we couldn't eat that much amount of pierogies, but we tried our best. The other thing was we managed to crash into the set of 80s movie and take some pictures with the cast and all those old rifles and old cars. That was pretty amazing. And I realized I'm not that claustrophobic because the elevator going up to the salt mine is very, very tiny and dark. It was a really good experience, not to mention that we stayed there for like 30 minutes without hearing from anyone. So it was quite of thrilled and also fun experience as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had a fantastic time there. But while we're talking about Krakow and Poland, there was a question from the audience. How many of the attendees were locals? Johan, I think I remember you talking a bit about this.
From what I heard, this might be totally wrong, but the rumors that I heard at the conferences, they try to balance this out. So I made a lot of local Polish, and they try to go 50-50. So you got a little bit of international flavor and local flavor clashing, which is awesome.
Nice, yeah, it's always important to see local developers at these bigger conferences. Kenneth, our resident comrades runner, marathon runner, I think I saw you running along the riverbanks at one stage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually like training for a marathon, and so I happened to be in Poland, and I was like trying to look for places to run, and I just decided, let me just do like a run around the river, and it was like really, really amazing. And just seeing the castle and a big riverbank, a few bridges. So I'm just so lucky that I decided to come out and cross the bridge, because I would have ended up going for like maybe 20 or 25 kilometer run. But thank God that I went up, because there was no other way to turn around. But it was amazing. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So the DDD event was fantastic, but I believe firmly that everything can be better, right? So if you could improve one thing for the next time this event rolls around, what would that be? Irie, let's start with you.
Yeah, like you said, I did think most of the sessions were really great. The only thing that I would say, since I found things like the code labs the most helpful, I would say to have more practical like sessions. So more stuff like code labs and people just showing demos and things like that. I actually didn't get to go to all the code labs I wanted to go to because the rooms got full as well. So I think they kind of underestimated how much people would want to do those kind of sessions.
Yeah, I agree strongly with that. The sandbox, the training sessions were really good, and there's obviously a lot of demand for that. So I'm sure Google's listening. Dario, what was something you think we could do a little better next year?
I think mostly what's around the code labs. Everything else was fairly good organized. It is always tricky to organize a conference that big. You have too many people. Like it's always very hard to make sure you have like perfect conditions for them. But I think like just making sure we have bigger rooms, that would be definitely one thing to notice. Apart from that, I think like everything was reasonably, not reasonably, very organized. And maybe ice cream for the whole day. That sounds fun.
Yes, Dario ran out of ice cream after lunch. That was very sad. But before we repeat the same suggestion 7 times, does anyone have any other specific things they would like to highlight about how an event like this could be improved?
Yes, I have a suggestion. So one of the cool parts for me was obviously speaking at the event. So what I would suggest is that the event involves a lot more at least Google developer experts to speak at the event. So I think I was like one of 2 GDEs who spoke. So I think there'd be a lot of really good content available if we let other people speak as well. So maybe have like a call for papers or just approach a lot more people to speak. I think that will be a really, really good addition to the event.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, the GDEs that did present did a fantastic job. So more of that's a good thing. But that does come back to what we were talking about earlier with DevFest. Now is a great opportunity for any developers that are interested in speaking to get hold of their local communities and either join in any DevFest events that are happening or help actually create new events for your community. Yeah, any other comments about the GDD event?
Yes, something I really liked was the talk by Flixbus about how they use Kubernetes in their company. So something I'd like to see more in the future conferences is more startups, more companies sharing how they're using the various technologies within Google Cloud or web or Firebase. It was really awesome to see a company explain how they're using Kubernetes. So more startups talking about their use of these technologies would be really awesome.
And I also just saw something very interesting where it made me felt like the people at Google are more human. They had these large screens where they show the schedule. And I took a photo of it because it amazed me is one of the schedules when showing it, there was an undefined variable at where it was, in which room it was located. So it felt good going home knowing there was a struggle with JavaScript and undefined.
Indeed. Did you ever find that talk? Well, at least I've managed to convince you that they are human. I'm not convinced yet. So it's just about time to wrap up this show. I don't know if there are any final words anyone would like to share. I agree. It was left me speechless too. So I would just like to thank all of the people who are on the panel today. It was great to spend time with you at the event and catch up again every month. And Nick, our special guest for this month, appreciate having you on board. And Joseph from iHub, doing the recording of the videos and making sure everything runs smoothly. Really appreciate it. And then for everyone who's been listening in, asking questions and tuning in regularly, we appreciate any feedback you have for us, any suggestions for how we could structure the show or future topics. We're definitely open to suggestions on all that. And then just thank you to everyone again, and we'll be back roughly this time next month. So if you want to share this video, which will be available, or tweet about it, remember the hashtag #GoogleAfricaDevs. Cool, thank you everyone. Goodbye.